The Bible text for today's message is from the Gospel of John, chapters 18 and 19. You can find it at the links on screen in both written and audio form.
It is finished. The cry that ended a life. But what does it mean? Our readings today are sombre and depressing. As we read, we may feel like those people gathered around the foot of the cross. They were a dejected group of losers. They were doing for this man they loved the only thing they could do to show their loyalty by simply being there to watch him die. It must have felt like the end of all their dreams, the crushing of their hopes, the final defeat of their expectations. The story seems to be one of unmitigated defeat. If this is God's plan, then this is pure foolishness. One moment of despair follows another until all that is left is for the faithful to watch him die and bury him. Let's look at a moment to see in the trial the failure. Here, Jesus is on trial for being a king, and yet has there ever been anyone who looked less like a king? He is dragged before Pilate and the death penalty demanded, but yet without charge. And when Pilate asks them what the charge is, all they can reply is, "We wouldn't have given him to you if he weren't a criminal." But somehow Pilate has heard that some people have been calling him Messiah. And so now he knows that the Messiah is the anointed king, and so Pilate asks, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus returns the question, "Is this your own question, or has someone else told you?" And Pilate's contempt can be heard. "Am I a Jew? Your own people and your leading priests brought you here." Obviously, he implies you cannot be a king. Why would your own people drag you here if you were? But Jesus claims to have a kingdom, just not one of this world. "Ah, so you are a king then," Pilate says, missing the point. But from this moment, his sarcasm takes over. Pilate goes out to the crowd and offers to release their king to them. But even the crowd hates this king. Rather than ruling them, he is at their mercy, and they ask instead for a terrorist to be released. And so the soldiers get their go at him. In mockery and sarcasm, they flog him with a lead-tipped whip. They put a crown of thorns on him. They put a purple robe on him and beat him. And the bleeding, beaten man, dressed as a king would be at his coronation, and to him the soldiers call out, "Hail, King of the Jews!" And then, wearing the clothes of his shame, he's presented to the people, and Pilate says, "Behold, here is the man." And the crowd goes wild. They go wild, shouting, "Crucify! Crucify!" Not the warmest reception for a monarch, is it? And finally, after toing and froing again, Pilate comes back to the people, his sarcasm dripping as he says to them, "Here is your king." You can almost hear his contempt for the people as he says, "Look, see what we have done to the one that you claim to be your king." But again the people cry, "Crucify, crucify!" And he is crucified. Pilate carries the mockery and the sarcasm through to the end. The sign stating the charge against him now proclaims him to be Jesus of Nazareth, the King of the Jews. Poor, weak, and dying, Jesus is proclaimed king. His throne is a cross. Has there ever been a more brutal coronation? And as we stand at the foot of the cross, do not our hearts break also to see this man of sorrows, mocked and beaten, bleeding, dying, an utter failure? The most he can do from his throne is to ask another man to look after his mother. Where now his dreams of a kingdom? Where now his promised life? Until finally there is only the cry, "It is finished." It is done. It's over with. The story closes in darkness and in despair and death. Is that all that there is? Is this simply a living parable to warn us that nice guys come last and that the price of goodness is death? Perhaps. Certainly that is all that the crowd sees that day. Hatred wins. But there may be more. As the king is lifted on the cross, we, the readers of John's story, remember that Jesus did once speak about being lifted up. When I am lifted up, he says, I will draw all people to myself. And so this king now stands lifted on the cross. And we recall that he said, as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, so that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. As Jesus' last hours approached, he spoke to his disciples about his glorification. The humiliation he was about to undergo, he calls his glorification, because in it God will be glorified. And he goes to his trial firmly stating that he does only the will of God his Father. And so Jesus himself seems to have seen his trial differently. Of course, he might be a madman. But what if he is correct? What if he is who he says he is? From time to time we hear people being sarcastic with one another. Sure, you of all people will win the art prize, I believe you. There's no better way to overcome sarcasm than to make the thing come true. And then people have to eat their words. Oh, you did win. Such a turn of events turns sarcasm into irony. And could it be that there is a divine joke going on here in this story? From the human point of view, Jesus' death is full of sarcasm. You, the King of the Jews? Yeah, sure, look what we do to you. But if Jesus' words are right, if here, as he is lifted up, is actually the moment of his glory, then that sarcasm is turned back. Then irony takes over. Hear the irony of the trial, as Pontius Pilate twice becomes God's tool to announce to the world, behold the man, behold your king. And the soldiers' mockery is turned back on them, as the robe and the crown that they put on Jesus now actually turn out to be a real crown and a true robe of state. And even the hate-filled crowd that demands he be lifted up on the cross is fooled in the end. And all they have done is to lift him up as he had always promised that he would be. Now is the hour of his glorification, and all the people who mocked him, who despised him, will find out that the joke is on them. Their sarcasm in proclaiming him king is now turned to irony. Even though they don't believe it to be true, their words and their deeds have done God's work, and his king is established on his throne. Now the final cry remains. At last, the deed, as his last deed, the king now proclaims to the world, it is finished. It is complete. I've done all that I came to do. Jesus said to Pilate, my kingdom is not of this world. And he says to all of us, just as Moses lifted up the snake in the wilderness, so the Son of Man must be lifted up, so that whoever believes in him may have eternal life. So today we have a choice. We can read today's story as just another human tale, And then it is the story of the death of hope and the victory of evil. We can read in it the sarcastic mocking of a defeated man. We can read these final words, "It is finished," as if what they mean is, it is over. Or we can read this story as God's own promise to us. Then it is the victory of hope. Then it is the defeat of evil. We can read sarcasm turned to irony and see God accomplishing his purpose, enthroning his king and giving him the power to rule. We can read the offer of eternal life to all who will believe. We can read those words. It is finished. It is complete. It is done. Today, in one sense, you have no freedom, because you have to understand this story one way or the other. Either today's story ends in death, or it ends in life. The final words say it all. It is finished. Is it over? Or is it complete? Which is it for you?